Hello, welcome to Animal Audit Corner. This channel is about all the former Scientologists and all of their advocates. The advocates for have all the stories about not only them, but about that cult that they were once in, which is Scientology. We are going to have a look into their world, their former world, and find out about their world. Here is the story about Chris Sheldon. I have a story about Chris Sheldon and his show on YouTube called Critical Clips. And this show is about Scientology and their thought process, that which he has knowledge about. He was once in Scientology. He was a Scientologist since he was a child when his parents were in Scientology, when he was in the organization. He was in that organization for 34 years, and 17 of those are in the Sea Org. When he eventually left in 2012. Chris has been out of Scientology for 14 years now, and he's never going back. The best thing that Chris ever did was leave that cult, that criminal organization did nothing but destroy lives. Excuse me. Scientology's thought process is unusual because of their programming into another person. They would program them. They are like they were a computer. And after they are done, they would control them like they were robots. They would do this by finding a person who's very vulnerable and would start to target them for their recruitment. Once a person is a Scientologist and is trained as an auditor, they are free to ask whatever question they want. They would also ask questions about past lives, which is something they're into. Then they would ask him comfortable. Now, they would think that you live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. They would have 200 questions that they would ask another Scientologist, and they would keep that file on record. Then when a person wants to leave Scientology, they would have that file against them to prevent them. Now, when they use past lives and think that they live lifetime after lifetime, they would think they would come back as a Scientologist and do Scientology again. I don't remember ever being in Scientology. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they come back. They're never going to remember that they were once a Scientologist. Let's face it. They're not going to have any memories of ever being a Scientologist if they do come back. Then once the auditor passes away, the papers would be kept. They would never throw that file away. Chris would know this firsthand when he was a Scientologist. They would ask him those 200 questions. One of them is about his past. Then when they do something wrong, they would go and find their folders. And if they can't find them, that folder, they would start to guess. This is what they would. All right, I can't find the clip. That'll do it. Say things like OT3, OT4, and use the state of clear or not. That's what they would use. I was going to show you that, but then I can't find it. What can you do? Okay. Then they would go to that person and tell them that they did something wrong in the past life, and whatever it is they did wrong, it's their fault that they either got hurt or mugged or raped. It would be similar to the Danny Masterson case. They would tell the Jane Doe that it happened because she did something wrong in the past life, which was the cruelest thing to do. Their critical thinking would be so much different from the outside world, especially with the way they adapt. They have their own language, which is the reason why they were never caught. And L.Ron Hubbard was such an evil genius. They practically got their own language. And like I said, David Miscavige kept his hands clean. Not only, and their critical thinking would do that. Now, here are the examples of Chris's. It's not even on there. I thought it had it. Sorry, everybody. Now, okay, I don't have the clips. After they would do that, they would use an international search for every folder they have on. Those files would move around. They just don't stay in one spot forever. They would move around when the Scientologists move. They could go to another country. They can go to another state. They can go to another city. It would follow them like a bad rash. Those files also move around country to country, even when that person goes into another state. Here in this country, I think I might have mentioned that too, but yeah. Those files never stay in one place. So whenever he moved and went to another country, those files would follow Chris. Chris has done that when he was in Scientology. He had went to Australia and those files followed him there. Of course, I just mentioned that. I guess I end up remembering all this. Me and writing these for hours. Those would go wherever the auditing would take place. You could be living there here in the United States while your files are in another country, or they would start to make a file once a person gets recruited into Scientology by a recruiter. And everybody is not allowed to talk to a recruiter. And Chris would think that they're the most annoying people on earth. He doesn't. Chris would think a recruiter are the most annoying thing on earth. And everyone hates those guys. Of course, I mentioned that he hated them. That's what would happen when everybody gets recruited into Scientology, and they would start a file on them once they get in, start the brainwashing process, have that file with the 200 questions, which would take forever. People that would finally admit they had accomplished every single person that they had recruited. They would accomplish all that. But now today, it's gone. And into staff, when they recruited into staff, they would know. They never say anything to the recruiter. Yeah. Those were the old days. Now, their numbers are low. In the Los Angeles Test Center is now a tourist attraction. Nobody is going in. It's a sideshow. And that's what they're known as now. Even if they do go in, they want to check it out and see how mindless the place is. But other than that, they don't go in. And now they turned into a sideshow. And the biggest thing in Scientology is no LSD allowed in the Sea Org. Scene of theirs, they think that Scientology is known for at the end. No drugs of any kind. Yeah, we don't want to affect those brainwashing techniques, huh? Yeah, they also think they're a rehab counselor, which they're not. But then, nevertheless, Chris has been out of Scientology. Once a person is a Scientologist and is trained as an auditor, they want is to ask questions about past lives, which they're really big into. They might be past lives, but everything will look familiar to me too. But maybe God sent us back. That's what I believe. But however, the way they take it is they think they're going to come back with the same memory, which they don't. They would come back, but they're never going to remember a thing about Scientology. Just for argument's sake, even if they do come back, they're not going to remember them ever being in Scientology. Overall, Chris would know this firsthand when he was in Scientology. They would ask him 200 questions, one of them about his past life, like he's gonna remember it. Even if he does see his past life, he's gonna come out of it and not really remember anything. But then ultimately, they would do that. They would use an international search for every folder they have on a person. Do they use a computer? You know what? Maybe OSA does, but they don't use it. Let any of the Sea Org members or any of the other Scientologists use a computer. They're not allowed. Yeah, contradicting, is it? And in conclusion, every single person that is recruited into staff will know they never say a single thing. And that would be what a tough break, isn't it? Well, yesterday, to recap yesterday, at the Public Works meeting, everybody in the Public Works who was told every president on that board not to even bother giving them a permit for this year's Halloween party because they either abuse their privileges or break the law. Either that, they don't get a permit at all and just have it anyway. But whenever there's a street closure, you're gonna have to have a permit. And you cannot be blocked any of the entry with cement blocks. There has to be a certain amount of feet that has to be open for emergency vehicles. They never do that. They totally block it. They think they are above. They just don't think. And this is the results they give every single year when there's an event. They don't even let their own Scientologists go. Or if they're young, they don't let them go either. And they don't have much of a childhood. They don't let them go to these street hooplas that they have. And the slave labor they have is unbelievable. They only pay those guys on the pennies, not the dollars, the pennies. They start them out with 13 cents an hour and it will go up to 75 cents and then it drops. So unbelievable. Sometimes they don't get paid at all. Of course, that's what Miriam presented to the presidents in the public. They have slave labor, which is definitely not allowed in this country. And then again, it's illegal everywhere in the world. not just in this state, or unless they're in the third, they just think they're above the law. Let's see. Then JoJo or Jill, whatever. I might have said her name wrong, although there is probably a JoJo in there somewhere. She would say they would have a black tent with, well, last year they had a black tent up and 2 guys that were dressed like vampires. Oh, well, one was a vampire and one was a clown. Now, she admitted she did not see any kids in there, but if there were to be kids in there, it would it was just so unbelievable. And of course, I I think I remembered that. Yep, and every year they do this. I recapped yesterday, and let's see. Oh, I call I called this organization with my idea. Of course, I had to fill out an application to do that, so I couldn't find it, but I managed to figure out, you know what? Maybe I'll send a letter. Yeah, this project is for former Scientologists who just got out, but I'm not gonna say what it is because what if it doesn't take place and it's and and then and they say, "Oh, well, we don't do that. A board decides, and if they decide not to, then that's it." I just bursted my own bubble. I just bursted SPTV's foundation bubble. Yes, this is for them, and I did volunteer. So I am trying hard to get a project off the ground, especially for ones that just got out of Scientology. When I'm in the kitchen every single weekend cooking, so they would learn a recipe. Well, I use it and I would usually just find the recipe to get an idea on and rewrite it to actually adjust it a little bit. So, you know what? I don't plain and simple. But the thing is, I don't try it out ahead of time. I just go ahead and do it. Yeah, it's a better idea to try it out ahead of time. But since I'm this go I'm not like a take charge person, but I do try. I try not to be the follower, I try to be the leader. Hopefully, something will get done like I have every single weekend, and hopefully this other project would get off the so, keep your fingers crossed for me, and that'll do it for tonight. So keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully, this other project will come through, like my weekend project. So here we go. Now, buy me a coffee. If you think I earned it, fine. Buy me a coffee. Or if you can't afford to buy me a coffee, you won't have to bother buying it for me. That's the kind of person I am. I'm not gonna milk you out of the money like Scientologists does. So buy me a coffee, hit the like, press, and go directly to the link right? And hit that link and go to the next clip. And I'll see you tomorrow.